Hello friends, welcome to Angular 18 series. If you have ever wanted to gain the in-depth knowledge of Angular, so this is the correct platform to you. So in this course of action, we will cover starting from installation of Angular to advanced concept of Angular, like connecting Spring Boot, fetching data from the database and show in the front end part. We'll cover each components and each concept of Angular like routing, session management through Akita, testings of Angular components using Karma, grid implementation, and the most important thing is we'll cover one project where we'll have a hands-on experience with debugging concepts. The most important thing is even if the experienced person in Angular also finding issues to find the issues. So that needs the debugging skills. So here we'll cover each and every debugging skills and how to find the issues. So this talent we can cover in this tutorial. When this series will end, you can be called as a full stack developer, I can say. During the course of action, if you find any difficulties, any doubts, then you can comment me in the comment section. If you find this tutorial is helpful to you, then it's my humble request to share this video content to among of your friends. It will helpful to them and it will helpful definitely to me also. So let's don't waste our time. We'll directly jump into the main course. So before going to Angular, let's see some basic fundamental of web applications. Normally, there are two parts while developing one web application. One is front end side, another is back end side. Whatever you are visualizing in front end, that is known as front end side. Let's say this is Amazon website, and whatever you are seeing, the graphical user interface, there is a charger, there is a scotch byte, I'm able to click the sale, I'm able to click the customer service. So these data I'm able to access in the graphical user interface. So that is known as, this is the front end part. Whatever data we are clicking, let's say I'm just signing here and press continue. So these data actually flow to the server side. So in the server side, they are manipulating those data, they are validating those data. The backend side is nothing but a database and server. These two are known as the backend side. Here this is the front end side. Okay, the front end, the data is processed to the backend side, and this is the database which actually stores the data. They are manipulating those data and sends back to the front end side. Whatever the data they will send back to the front end side, the front end side will display those data in the graphical user interface. Then we are visualizing those data. If the login is successful, then the server side will send back to the front end side. A front end side, whatever the data, whatever the user id and password you are sending to me, I validated that and it's a authenticate user. I'm sending the confirmation message, the user is authenticate user. Then front end side will redirect that page to the next level, that is the profile page. So this is the basic flow of any web application design. So what is Angular in the front end side or back end side? Angular actually remains in the front end side. Initially, the web applications are developed through HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So Angular is a framework of JavaScript. So how Angular evolved in 2010, we'll see. But here for the basic concept, I just explain front end and back end side of a web application. So before going to actual concept of Angular and the history of Angular, let me clear some basic concept, that is rendering in application, rendering in browser. So what is rendering? Rendering is nothing but displaying the data in the front end, that is known as rendering. So this is the front end of our application. So normally the server sends data to the front end to displaying the data. So every time front end and back end means server and front end means the browser. The front end and back end data communicating each other. So server is sending data to the front end, so that data is showing in the front end side. So that is known as rendering. So this is our client side and this is our server side and this is the browser. So there are two types of rendering. One is client side rendering and other is server side rendering. So this is the most important concept I'm trying to make you understand very simply. So what is server side rendering? Let's say this is our front end and there is no data. When the application starts, there is no data in the front end, and server has the responsibility to transfer data to the front end side. Now server is sending HTML file, CSS file and JavaScript file individually to the front end, and front end download those data. Normally JavaScript type has number of functions. If the size of those functions is maximum, then it is taking maximum time to download those data. So what is the effect happen? Then the initial loading time in the browser will be taking longer time in case of client side rendering. So when the data loading is completed, that is HTML, CSS file and JavaScript all are loaded completely in the browser and render the website in the front end. That is known as client side rendering, because client is responsible to load the data and display in the front end side. In client side rendering, one advantage is that when user reload the page or redirect one page to another page, then it will not communicate with the server for the data, because as already the data is downloaded, all the JavaScript function, all the HTML CSS file downloaded in the client side, then it is directly communicate in the front end side only. It is communicate with the JavaScript function which is already present in the client side. That's why the interaction will become faster in client side rendering, and it is hugely used by the chatting applications like WhatsApp and Telegram. They are using the client side rendering for faster interaction. When there is a huge number of users, then it is preferable to use the client side rendering. So let's say what is server side rendering. Same thing, when application start, then there is no data in the front end. So here one difference is there. The server prepare the HTML, CSS and JavaScript file in the server side only. It render the website in the server side and create a fully fledged HTML website in the server side only, and sends those data to the front end, and within no time it will display in the front end. That means initial loading time is much faster than client side rendering, because the client doesn't responsible to load those data, to load the JavaScript file. Already it is rendered in the server side. You can see here the data is already loaded in the server side only. But one demerit in server side loading is that when the user reload the page, or when the user redirect one page to another page, then every time it is asking for the data to the server side. That means the front end and the server communication happen regularly whenever there is a reloading happen. So that's why it is bad for interactive mode, but good for faster initial loading. And it mostly uses in blogging application where they need faster initial loading, and there is less number of users use those applications. But in client side rendering, large number of users are using this application. So this is the basic difference between server side rendering and client side rendering. Before 2010, how web applications are designed, these are designed by HTML, CSS and JavaScripts, and it was just a reformation in web technology because it makes the website little bit faster. So what is the merit of HTML, CSS and JavaScript before 2010? It was easy to learn, reduce server load, asynchronous. That means when you are redirecting one page to another, the page reload doesn't happen. JavaScript was object oriented. We can send multiple attributes in a single object, that is object oriented, and the performance was a little bit high rather than traditional technologies. So that is the merits of AngularJS. So what are the demerits of AngularJS? Slower DOM and the code visibility. DOM is nothing but a tree structure of HTML file. Okay, so that we can call a object, that is document object model. Okay, and code visibility. Suppose this is a JavaScript website, and if you right click in the website and go to view page source, so you can see all the codes here. So this is one main security concern issue. Anyone can see your code, and the hacking will be possible. If any hacker will see your code, then it's easy to hack your website. Cross browser interpretation. That means if I develop a JavaScript website, then it runs successfully in Chrome browser, but it is not working in Mozilla. That means we need to change some code for Mozilla and Chrome separately. That create an issue in JavaScript languages. So debugging issue, as there is no framework, there is no structured code present in the JavaScript, so debugging was become very difficult on the JavaScript websites. And in the slower network, the initial loading time is too maximum. As you remember, before 2005 or 2000, when you click on page, then it load very slowly. So that page are designed through JavaScript languages. So initial loading time was become very slow. Then at 2010, and Google developed one framework that is known as AngularJS. So AngularJS is nothing but a framework of JavaScript. Framework is nothing but it minimizes the coding effort and create multiple functions and club into a library file, that is known as framework. So Google developed one framework known as AngularJS, which is a framework of JavaScript in 2010. So what is the merit of AngularJS? It removes all the demerits and the new features introduced in AngularJS that drastically changes the web application development. So these are the features of AngularJS. MVC architecture, model view and controller pattern is integrated in AngularJS. Two-way data binding, that means view and controller, they can interact each other without any hesitations. Dependency injections, that means we can use third-party library in AngularJS. That is the dependency injection module. Directive and custom components. So directive and custom components is nothing but one small functionality. If you will just use those tags, we can achieve thousands lines of code what we have written in the JavaScript code. That means it minimizes the coding effort and create a small functionality or small tags. Single page application, we'll learn in detail what is single page application. The actual website is designed within a single page and there is no reloading happen each time. Easy debugging, as Angular create one framework and it's a structured way we can handle where the actual issue happen very quickly. That means the debugging happens very quickly. These are the drastically changes happen in the AngularJS. There is a revolution happen in the web development. So now we'll see regarding Angular versions. So if you see in 2010 AngularJS come to the market. So AngularJS drastically changes from JavaScript. We already seen what is the merits of AngularJS. So but there are some limitations in AngularJS. So AngularJS is basically the framework of JavaScript. When we are really deploying the application into server, we create a bundle, that is dist folder in Angular. That bundle size increases in case of AngularJS. So in 2016, AngularJS, the new version came, that is Angular 2. So Angular 2 changes its framework from JavaScript to TypeScript. TypeScript is a language where it supports many OOPS concept, abstraction, interference. Simultaneously, the bundle size become very less. So it became an advantage for the Angular developer to work with Angular 2. So in 2016, the Angular 2 came to the market. The core team of Angular regularly working for developing Angular framework, and every 6 months a new version came into the market. So in 2017, Angular 4 has came. So due to some limitations, Angular 3 is not released in the market directly. They come up with Angular 4. In Angular 4, they optimized the framework and improved the universal structure. And in the same year, Angular 17 came into the market and it support Angular HTTP client and build optimizer. So team is working to develop Angular step by step. They are releasing new version of Angular regularly. So in 2018, Angular 6 come to the market. The major changes happened in Angular 6. They introduced Angular Material support. Angular Material is meant for beautifying the Angular framework. Then in 2018, same year, Angular 7 is introduced. There are small changes happened in Angular 7. They just introduced the virtual scrolling, drop, drag. In the year of 2019, Angular 8 has come. The major changes happened here, the rendering process. They introduced some advanced rendering process in Angular 8. So in this version of Angular, the team has developed improved version of debugging and faster build. Then in the same year 2020, Angular 10 has developed. So in this version of Angular, they have improved the date range picker in the Angular material. Then Angular 11 has come in November 2020. They have introduced one interesting feature, hot module replacement. That means when developer updated a part of code, then no need to reload whole application. That part of code need to be reload in the browser so that whole part of code will not be affected. Then in Angular 12, Angular 13 and Angular 14, they have introduced standalone component. That means a component can be independently created inside the Angular framework. What is standalone component? How to create the standalone component we'll see while we are implementing the code. In 12, 13 and 14, the server side rendering is also improved. And in the Angular 16, the important feature, that is signal features, is introduced, and hydration. So what is hydration? When we are using the server side rendering, we know that the browser is not so interactive. So to make the browser more interactive, the hydration feature is introduced in Angular 16. And in the next year, Angular 16 is again released because there are some pending tasks in the release version. And in November 2023, Angular 17 come to the market. And here they have improved the debugging, they have improved the server side rendering, and they have improved the standalone components. So these are the features as introduced in Angular 17. Finally, in May 2024, Angular 18 come to the market. Here, the major changes is they have updated the standalone APIs, and they have changed the improved version of RxJS for better performance. So here in this section, we have seen what is the history, then what is server side rendering, client side rendering, so why Angular came to the market. So these all we have discussed. It is the time for the installation of Angular 18 and to see what is the project structure, how will work in Angular 18 in practical. And if you like the session, just subscribe our channel and press the like button. Thanks.